Well, here I go for another installment on my history. I'm going to start off with my grandparents again, stuff I forgot about them. My grandfather's name was Harry Stepp, and my grandmother's name was Nora Pearl Stepp, or Goff, Goeff. That was her maiden name, Pearl Goff. And they came from Denver, Colorado. That's where my dad was born, and my grandfather used to run a wagon train up the mountains or somewhere near Denver, and my grandmother, she lived on a little farm outside of Denver somewhere with her parents, and I don't know how many brothers and sisters. I did delve into the history, and I found my DNA on the Stepp side goes way back through down about to 1635 or something, down through the Carolinas. They came over from England, and the Stepp family before that goes back to 10,000 years in England. English-Irish, my heritage is English-Irish with a bit of Scottish, 49%. And then 29% Scandinavian and 21% Southern European. And the Stepp family, they go back into probably Germany. I think they were farmers or something. And then way back through there, who knows where. I think it's down into Ethiopia or something, if that course is true. I got mine done by National Geographic. And then my mother's maiden name was Smith. Her mother's name was Smith, and her dad's name was John Cadden. Eleanor Smith was my mother's name. That would be my other grandparents. Now, the Stepp grandparents, they got married in Denver, I guess, and they had my dad, that's Frank Stepp, and my uncle Monty Stepp, and Auntie Vera. And my grandmother knew Buffalo Bill when she was a little kid. His sisters had a ranch near my grandmother's place, and she used to go sit on his knee when he was visiting. And then years later, when he had his big Wild West show, he came back to Denver, and he remembered my grandmother, and he gave her front row seats at his show. And she used to be able to ride along and shoot a gun like Annie Oakley, off a horse and everything, target shoot. Like, I actually had that gun for a long time. It was a Marlin 22 with an octagon barrel. My dad gave it to me, and unfortunately I sold it to my cousin Reed Finlayson, who said he was going to hang on to it and I could buy it back someday, and he went and sold the darn thing. Gee, I'm so sorry I didn't keep that gun, because I tried to give it to Jesse once and he didn't want it. But it was a real family heirloom. But anyway, it's gone now. So then my grandparents on the Stepp side, they took a wagon train up to and settled in Gem, Alberta. And they lived there for a while. It's a small town east of Calgary. And then they made their way out to Sicamous and homesteaded in Sicamous out by there's a place called Stepp Pit Road out there, which my grandfather had a sawmill back in the mountains there, and it's a beautiful little piece of land and nestled between the mountains and a valley with a little creek going through. And there was it turned into a garbage dump in my early years in Sicamous. We used to go up there and look through and try to find old things, and I took Jesse up once to the other old garbage dump out of Sicamous, which was on the road that went past the CPR hotel. And we took the old gun and went shot tin cans out there. I still got the tin can with the holes in it in my collection of stuff. Anyway, my grandparents settled there, and they had some friends across the road that built a beautiful log cabin that's still, a log home that's still there. Gosh, I can't remember their name now. I will eventually. Later on, I'll tell you. But she had the most fantastic salt and pepper collection of, I don't know whatever happened to it, but my sister would know the names. My mom and dad, like my mother's side of the family, he worked on the railroads. He was a drunk. I told you before, my mother threatened to kill him once when she got older. He used to beat up her mother, and he never gave them much money. They lived on potatoes and like Irish people, you know. And I heard my grandmother Eleanor. Now, she used to clean houses for people and stuff like that. And I don't know, the story is maybe she slept with a few of the guys on the side to make a little extra money. I often wondered if my Uncle Johnny was just a half-brother, because he doesn't look like the other Cadden family, like Auntie Nell, Auntie Mary, my mother, Uncle Bert. And Uncle Eddie was my mother's younger brother. He died when he was 14. He fell on his gun out hunting down in Mara and shot himself in the stomach and died. His grave's down in Mara where my mother's is. And anyway, Uncle Johnny, he was a great guy, Uncle Johnny. And Auntie Leona. He never quite looked like the other Caddens. Part of this story, I'll get back to the grandparents of why I'm thinking about it. When me and Donna were about 12 years old, I was about 12 or 10 or something, we took a trip to Lillooet one summer, drove into Seton Lake and stayed at Lillooet for a week in there, 2 weeks or something, at Uncle Johnny and Auntie Leona's place. Their kids were only very small then, and we used to go out to the store at Seton Lake. Lillooet was very hot. And I remember I went up the mountain once with Uncle Johnny. He took me up to his logging camp up the mountain, and we packed a lunch. And I was just a little kid, you know, and a young guy. So we get in the crummy with all these guys, and we drive up the mountain, and we got to this spot where, it's a weird story, this guy had parked his car, left his truck or car up there, I remember, and someone had got up and took a great big poop on top of the hood of the car. There was this big pile of shit on the car. I don't know what's that all about. Anyway, they all laughed, and oh boy. And then we went up to the camp all day. I just remember how hot it was and thinking that, boy, I'd hate to have a job like that. And then we used to go swimming. I think Auntie Leona worked at the lake, at the store at the lake in Seton Lake. And I remember how much they were in love back then. They were holding hands, and Uncle Johnny could buy salmon off the native Indians there for so cheap. Lillooet was kind of a rough place, a lot of drunks and drunken native people. And one thing that sticks in my mind, I probably shouldn't say this, but when we came home from swimming one day, I walked by the bedroom, and Auntie Leona had her bathing suit half off with her bare breasts hanging out. And I remember that was another big thrill of my life. Oh, well, what can you say when you're young, you know? Anyway, getting back to my grandparents, they came to Sicamous, and I've told other stories about them, but my mom and dad, here's an unfortunate story. I was sort of like a spoiled kid by my dad. I don't think my father ever thought Donna was his real child, you know. She's never had a test to find out, but apparently when Mom had a boyfriend that she really loved, and she actually met him years later at a reunion down in Mara. And Donna said she was just like a little schoolgirl. She was so excited to meet him. And he was still married, or his wife had just died. I can't remember. Mom was single by then. Dad had died a long time ago. And she was all so thrilled to meet him again. And I think she wished she would have married him. Dad somehow talked her out of marrying that guy and married him. But the guy later died of cancer. But Dad talked Mom into marrying him, and my grandfather was after my mother when my dad was at war. He was trying to get into my mom's pants. Gee. And that's what my mom said. And I don't know, the steps. But anyway, my dad he married my mother. I think my mom told me once he told her on their wedding night that he didn't really love her. Oh gosh, what things happen, you know. And anyway, the other part of the story, he never liked my sister very much, who I loved very much, and I was like a spoiled brat and took advantage of it when I was a kid. I'm embarrassed I ever did that, but you're stupid when you're young. And he spoiled me. And the time I told you before that he got mad at me twice, the other time was the once with the elastic bands where it snapped on his fingers and he said, "Take the damn thing," when he was drinking. But the other time when the custard got spilled, that was Donna he got mad at, because he used to get mad at her a lot. And she still hates him. Anyway, apparently when he came back from the war, my mom dressed Donna. I wasn't born yet. My mom dressed Donna up as a cute little dress that she always had, this little tartan dress, and bundled her all up and walked over from Sicamous over the train bridge, which is a long walk in the freezing cold, and it was middle of winter time, over to the train station to meet Dad. And Donna was like 4 years old or 3 years old. She'd never met him before. And then Dad came in on the train and got off the train, and they never hit it off, because I don't think he thought she was his daughter. It was a bad thing. You know, war just gets in the way of things so bad. And she, he wouldn't even carry her back across the bridge, apparently. I can't think of my dad being so horrible, but my sister's opinion of my dad was totally different than mine, because he spoiled me. He, when I was a kid, I could get pretty well anything I wanted from him, and he was always sort of mean to Donna. He would always side with me. And then when I learned how to drive, I used to go out and he'd let me drive the truck. We had a 1946 Ford pickup truck. I painted white walls on it and painted the fenders gray. It was a green color. And I used to drive it around the ball field, around and around and around. And then when we would go on these trips to Frog Lake, we'd go up to Frog Lake, and it was a lake about 7 miles up the mountain out of Three Valley Gap near Revelstoke. We'd go up there fishing and picnicking, and we'd also go up all the old logging roads fishing with fly fishing. And Dad would move over in the truck and let me steer and drive. That's how I learned how to drive. But one thing I do remember is when I was a kid in Nelson, he bought me one of those pedal cars. I had a little red pedal car, which I loved. But the thing that I really loved that I still have, it's about a 6-inch long, maybe 6 or 8 inch long toy car that's made of metal with a plexiglass roof. It's like a Ford Sunliner, about a 1954. It's an Irwin make, it's called. And it has little windshield wipers that when the wheels go, the windshield wipers go back and forth, and it has a clear plexiglass roof, and the wheels on the back have that motor in them that when you push it on the floor, it and let it go, it'll go by itself, right? But it needs to be fixed a little bit. But another really neat thing is my dad made one thing he did make, which is really neat, which I still have, is he out of a tank. He was a welder, and he owned the shop in Sicamous. But he was, when he went to war, he was a welder over in England making tanks, and he made this little heart out of the glass that's in the periscope of the tank. And it's thick, and he cut these little holes in it and put a picture of him and Mom and Donna in it. And it's got little brass posts with a sort of a ebony bottom on it. I still have it. And I still also have a little candle that I gave my mother when I was very, very young, and some poems that I wrote her. The little candle's a little fawn with the candle wick coming out of its head. I got it wrapped up somewhere. And another thing I want to tell you is that the talent contest that I did in Sicamous with Jimmy Johnson when I was 12, I remembered the other song. It was a Fair and Young song, and it was called, here we go, Be Alone With You. One song was Don Gibson, It's Been a Blue, Blue Day, I Feel Like Running Away. The other was, How I'd Love to Be With Alone. How I'd Love to Be Alone With You. Yeah, we sang harmony on that. Anyway, that was by Farron Young, that song. I remember also, well, let's see here, Learning to Drive, failed from. Going up the Shuswap Lake many years ago. We didn't go up there very much because we were too poor. But up the Shuswap Lake, you would never see a boat up there, hardly ever. It was like so remote up there. It was just beautiful. And you could sit on the beach, and once in a while you'd see a boat. The barge went up to take supplies up. Apparently in Sicamous, before I got there, the Shuswap Lake used to freeze all the time, and they actually took dog sleds with the mail and everything and to people. That's many years. I remember the Shuswap Lake freezing a little bit when I was a kid. Mara Lake froze over quite a lot, but I don't think they freeze over anymore at all. But just a sec, drink of my coffee. Anyway, Revelstoke back in those days, they used to get like 20 feet of snow. I've seen pictures of Revelstoke with holes cut to go to the front door. Revelstoke was a very rough town. Freddie Baruski came from there. He was like a big shot. His parents owned the Regent Hotel, and he'd come down to Sicamous with his fancy car, and he had all the girls, and he kind of never was friendly with me. I got in touch with him years later. He lived up at Whistler, and I forget, he said something to me I didn't like again. And then I got in touch with him on Facebook years later, too, and he said something else I didn't like. I can't remember the comments, but he was always thought he was a big deal, you know. And they sort of owned Revelstoke. But one guy we did like was old Baraduzzi. He lived in Mum's trailer court later years. Jesse just loved him. And Chelsea, too. He was an old guy, about 80 years old, 80, 85 maybe. He used to eat hot peppers, like pickled hot peppers. Jesse and I even smoked a joint with him. He got stoned. I remember he said, saw a good-looking girl walking by. He says, "Oh, look at that one." He says, "Oh, the mind's willing, but the body fails me." I remembered another quote by my mom used to say all the time, "Why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free?" Anyway, okay, let's see. We used to listen to KOBY, which is a San Francisco radio when I was a teenager, and it was a station from San Francisco. It would come in, you could start getting it about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and it would be strong all night long. We would listen to all the latest songs. So I grew up with the early rock and roll, really great from San Francisco. It came from that thing, that radio station. Another thing was there was a Midway came to town once, I remember. I always remember how sleazy the people that worked with it. It was like a crummy little one. Anything that would come to Sicamous wouldn't be too much of a big deal. Like a traveling bunch of gypsies or something. Anyway, I remember getting on this one of those salt and pepper shakers that has the arm with the carriage on each end, and it goes around and spins around. I don't think this one spun, though. I think it was just fixed, because we got into it. I was just a little kid, and the guy put the seatbelt around me. It wasn't tight enough. When we went upside down, I was hanging about 6 inches off the seat, scared out of my wits. Man, I'll never do that again. Anyway, another story from Sicamous was, let's see, some of my girlfriends, Cindy Fell. We used to party out at Lindy Lazon's, I told you before. The other one, I can't remember her name, the little fat one that I tried to feel up. And then there was Connie Martinook. Her and I used to go out periodically, and we used to take my dad's truck and park in the bush. And she was a Catholic. I tried and tried on her and never could get anywhere. Well, I get a little bit, and then it would be stop, every time. Our girls back in those days were very prudish, And then I went out with June Carmichael for a long while. She was a beautiful girl too, but I didn't get to first base with her either. Same old thing. It was. And then Susan Green, she wasn't really a girlfriend. I remember being on the bus with her once on a school bus, and she stuck my hand up under her bra and gave me a little feel. But I never really dated her. I don't know why she did that, but it was fun. Anyway, and Lynn Swallow from Salmon Arm, I went to grade 13 in Salmon Arm for a little while before I quit, and then that's my Vancouver story coming up. Lynn Swallow was a real beautiful girl. I think she was probably Catholic too, but girls didn't, there wasn't free love in those days. They waited till they got married, why buy the cow when you get the milk for free, kind of a thing, I wish I could remember the one on the bus trip that was the little sort of chubby one that I tried on. But anyway, those were some of my girlfriends. I nearly married Lynn Swallow. I went out with her in Vancouver. When I came to Vancouver, there was a bunch of the Salmon Arm people living down here, and we used to party together and everything. I was still going out with Lynn Swallow, and I nearly married her, but I decided to go to New Zealand again. But I'll tell that on my Vancouver part of the story.